Here we go. And I'll hand it over to Joanne Garton, our Technical Assistance Coordinator. Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks so much, Gwen. Hoping that everyone can hear me. If you can give a thumbs up, a nod, great. Okay, I do see some familiar faces and names on the screen, but for those who I haven't met before, I'm Joanne Garton. I am the Technical Assistance Coordinator with the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program. And our program has staff in both UVM Extension, where Gwen works, and Vermont Forest Parks and Rec, where I work. And I am in my home office in Montpelier, but I also have an office in Montpelier. So our program does serve the entire state. We don't really have like regional offices for our urban and community forestry work, which is a real pleasure for me because that means I get to travel around a lot and meet some of you in your towns. So, but today we have a tree warden roundtable. So I know some of you are tree wardens in your town, and some of you probably work with tree wardens. And I want to just I have kind of three general topics I want to cover. I have some slides to share, but my intent is not that this is me talking at you the whole time, this instead is we have some ability to share ideas. Getting the internet unstable note. Hopefully it's okay now. Yeah. So yeah, you feel free to use the chat and or the raise hand or just start talking and we'll be able to catch questions. But it's really nice to see all of you. Thanks for taking some time this evening to share some information and do an update. So I'm going to get going with the three buckets to cover tonight are an update on emerald ash borer, kind of state of the insect in Vermont and what's going on management-wise. I want to share a bit about our updated municipal tree inventory tool, which some of you have used maybe in previous iteration, but we've got kind of a new version cooking, and I just want to let you know that this is there and remind you that it's available for all of you to use. And last bucket is shade tree preservation plans, one of the elusive management tools we're working on statewide. And I know I said 6:30 to 8. I'm going to try to condense most of our information into 6:30 to 7:30 and then be available to keep chatting for those who want, and for those who feel saturated, that'll probably be a good time to check out then. So great, I see people popping up everywhere, great. Okay, so quick information share on emerald ash borer. Still a thing, still here, and really expanding across the state. You might have a sense that like the party has passed nationwide when it comes to understanding how to manage and fund for managing ash trees, but as many of you know, we are not that far along in Vermont. There is EAB in many places in Vermont, but not everywhere, and it's certainly not very extensive. So I am going to, hopefully, maybe Gwen, you can give me a nod when you see a picture of this guy, emerald ash borer. Good. And I'm going to assume that all of you sort of know what emerald ash borer is and ash trees. I know that many of you are tree experts. So we'll skip right to kind of some of the updates here of where we're knowing that the insect is statewide. We have a couple new maps available. Again, all our stuff is at vtinvasives.org. But these are two new ways of sharing information. And I definitely encourage you to keep checking every now and then as to where EAB has been found. On the left, we have towns where EAB has been confirmed, either in an infestation or in as a singular insect in a trap. And it's broken down by the year it was confirmed, which just starts to tell the story a little bit of where we've been seeing EAB pop up. And then on the right is that kind of heat map / fried egg map you've likely seen before. So if you're looking for your town, it's probably in an infested area, statistically speaking. There's certainly a lot of Northeast Kingdom, Lamoille County, where there isn't EAB at the moment. but a lot of the state does have EAB, and particularly the southern part of the state here. That's an area we're finding as a program, we're not providing as much assistance. We just haven't had as many calls from folks further to the southwest. But there is absolutely various detections of EAB. Just as an update as well, the slow the spread recommendations are just that. They are recommendations. And the federal quarantine regarding emerald ash borer has been lifted, which means that in terms of transporting ash around to certain states or certain counties, it's not as complicated as it used to be. However, the rubber does hit the road at transporting knowingly infested material. So if you take down some ash trees and you see there's EAB in them and you put them in any kind of vehicle and truck them away, that is something that the Agency of Agriculture could actually fine you for, or your town or your logger. So that is really where there is law surrounding not transporting pests. But many of the other items regarding ash tree management still apply. Moving wood during the non-flight season, which is our winter, October through May, keeping wood local, noting if there's any signs of infestation, treating wood before it's moved, either heat treating or chipping. So just kind of get a quick update on that in a way, the recommendations are simpler, but the same tenets apply. Don't move firewood, don't move ash wood around, keep it local. I did want to say that we do have some municipal trainings coming back this summer. We've had about 3 or 4 years now of ash tree training for municipal employees who are not necessarily city arborists or city foresters, but who are people who are working with trees in some way or another. There may be parks crew, road crews, public works crews. We had this awesome workshop this past summer. On the right there is Adam McCullough, the former city arborist in Montpelier, showing folks how to use lines and throwing ropes into trees to be able to guide them safely to the ground while no one is underneath the drop zone. They're able to really practice an affordable and relatively low-tech solution to keeping people safe when they're taking down trees, particularly unpredictable ash trees. And we will hopefully be offering this again this summer. It was just a fantastic day-long course, or not even half-day course. And everyone left with kind of a rope throwing kit with some throw lines and some ropes to bring home. So definitely keep your eyes open for that for municipal staff in your town. We are updating case studies. We have a wonderful UVM senior forestry major working with us this winter and spring. And we're revisiting a couple of towns that have done some emerald ash borer management work with grants funds from Urban and Community Forestry Program. So keep your eyes on your tree mail for those types of summaries. I also just want to share a bit of information. About 2 weeks ago, I was in East Montpelier giving kind of an update about similar things regarding ash management. And one topic that has come up a lot, just so that you have some information to share out, are the state's biocontrol efforts to manage emerald ash borer. So there's a lot to know about this, and it's super interesting, but the gist of it is that there are parasitic wasps that will parasitize either EAB larvae or eggs. And as far as it's clinically tested so far, what they will parasitize is only agrillus beetles. So beetles, including emerald ash borer. The only agrillus beetle we have here is emerald ash borer. So there are 3 places in Vermont now where some of these releases are happening. South Hero, L.R. Jones State Forest, which is in Plainfield, and Whipstock Hill Wildlife Management Area. And just if you want more information, please do ask me. It's really fascinating kind of landscape scale EAB management. It's not something you can use acutely, like to save the trees in your backyard, for example. It's really more of a landscape scale approach to tamp down the curve of EAB infestation. But we've got a couple of articles going on out about this. One from us, Release the Wasps, and another that came out with Vermont Public this past fall. So I definitely encourage you to check those out if you're wanting to learn more, or ask me. And I know a little bit, but some of our forest health staff know a whole lot, and I can share that with you. Last kind of ash tree update before I turn it over to you is many of you know, likely, that there are 3 native species of ash in Vermont: white ash, green ash, and then black ash, also called brown ash. And white ash and green ash are often the ash that are on our radars because we see them either planted or growing everywhere in the forest, and they can be really big. But black ash is definitely a common species of tree in Vermont, and one that has a lot of cultural importance, ecological importance, historic importance, particularly to the Abenaki people in this region, who have used it for basket making and other black ash crafts for millennia. And black ash, as far as we know, has 0 resistance or tolerance to emerald ash borer. We're essentially looking at the extinction of a species, save any effort to save seeds and treat these trees with insecticides. We've had great work for the past year from a graduate student from University of Vermont, Charlotte Caddo, who's doing a lot of citizen science work and black ash long-term monitoring plots and helping us connect with basket makers to do more outreach. In that kind of middle photo, we're pounding some ash logs at a workshop last fall to ultimately make those splints that you see in the third photo. And just to kind of raise this as another aspect of ash tree management that maybe we're not talking about as acutely when we think of roadside or urban tree plantings, but has a massive effect on local hydrology, wildlife diversity, and then of course a giant historic cultural values to the Abenaki people. So again, another kind of tickler for your ear to ask me more, and we'll share some of the story. Of course, the story of black ash among the Abenaki people is not our story to tell, but we can start to share some information and give you some other resources. And just to be cognizant that while we're out, thinking about managing ash tree risk in public ways and places, and those are often not black ash, there's a lot of black ash to find. They're kind of hidden in plain sight, and it's pretty fascinating to learn about black ash more and really be cognizant of the species that we're losing from the landscape. Charlotte, our graduate student, has a couple of what's called story maps, kind of like maps mixed with photos, mixed with text, that she's talking about and sharing, and we'll be sure to share those out on our website shortly. But it's been pretty cool to kind of track her field studies through the last year or so and the type of connections she's making. I think the last slide on this topic is grant funding. Just a screenshot of the grant you just missed if you didn't already apply or get one yourself. We just closed out a round of funding again for municipalities that are planting new trees to replace ash that they're losing in their public ways and public places. You can see down at the bottom, this particular grant awards were between $3,000 and $20,000, and does focus a lot on management, replanting, and replanting. But Elise, our program manager, will be talking about this more in a couple of weeks, but there is really a lot of opportunities / money coming down the pike to be planting diverse urban forests and taking care of diverse urban forests. And just to let you know that is, we expect more funding that will be allocated to municipalities, coming out this year and being available in 2024 and beyond that. Tree removals are often the sticking point. It's hard for us to get funding for that, but in terms of planting trees and understanding how to regrow our urban forests in the face of emerald ash borer is a big priority. I'll leave this up maybe just for a moment because my next slide gets on to part 2 of municipal tree inventory tools. But I did want to take a moment now to just open the floor a little bit for folks who are doing ash tree removals or thinking about ash tree removals or have a burning question about how the heck this works in your municipality. I definitely see some faces of folks I've talked to regarding, you know, what's going to happen next. And I'm going to pick on one person. He can decline if he wants. But David Birdsall, and I see you there. I know we've kind of been talking about, like, in Tinmouth, what might happen next. I wondered if you could share maybe just a thought or two, or a burning question you have for the tree warden community.
Sure. We did a count, and we figure we have over 4,000 trees in our right of ways, so we're concerned. We're trying to figure out currently whether we should, how proactive we should go with removing some of the worst ones that are over the roads preemptively before the EAB gets here. Looking at individual methods for going after the trees. We brought up Greater Heights out of Bennington has a telehandler that can reach over 100 feet with the hydraulic chainsaw and the grapple on it. And we had him come up and look, and we're considering trying to bring him in and tackling the worst trees. We're just feeling from, you know, my background with the game of logging and chainsaw and hazardous tree work is it's going to be much easier and safer to deal with these trees while they're alive. Once they start dying, they turn into styrofoam, and they become extremely dangerous. So the challenge is how to do that. What are
the budget thoughts right now in Tinmouth? And for those who haven't been to Tinmouth, it's not a metropolis. It's a small rural town.
Yeah, we have about 600 people, and where the select board's been dedicating $5,000 a year we're on our third year now. So it's been a little cumulative. We haven't started spending it yet, but we had an organization, you know, regular arbor tree care business come in and look, and just to do one stretch of about 3 miles was going to be over $60,000 for them to do that, to take the trees down. And I believe they were going to chip them. So it's pretty, there's a lot of money being talked about.
Maybe I'll call on another person, but then definitely feel free to chime in about what's going on for you and maybe what your sticking points are. And actually, before we leave you, David, what is the sticking point right now? Money or something?
I think for us, yes, for us, it's money. Yeah. Just trying to figure out how to do it. You know, I think what we're going to end up doing is flagging the trees that look the most precarious, that when they start to die, rather than certainly going through every one of them. And so doing it in a tier system. We're picking our most traveled routes first, going to tackle them. And I think that's going to be financially the best way for us to do that.
Maybe I'll swing to, I see a couple faces from Charlotte, which is a community who has removed ash. The $60,000 for 3 miles. I guess, how many trees is that, David? Do you know?
That's over 1,000 trees.
Yeah. All right. Does that raise any eyebrows anywhere, or nod of approval? Yes. Understanding. Maybe over to Alexa. I see you there. Yeah, there you go.
So I'd like to ask a question. I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand with this. So is it okay to jump in?
Totally.
My name is Jake Kucher from Westfield. I'm on a select board, and I just have to ask a question. You know, ash is good firewood, and I'm not sure, you know, how to bring that to the conversation, but if somebody's going to charge you $60,000 to take trees down, they're probably going to have a few $1,000s worth of firewood, which they don't have to skid out very far. It's going to fall right in the road. So I'm wondering if these trees are removed early on before they become styrofoam, as you mentioned, if there's a little bit of value that could be pulled out of them. Some of them may have some pretty good logs. Ash is pretty good lumber if it's taken down before it's rotten, dead and rotten. So I just want to bring that to the conversation. And I'm not saying that I have answers to that, but it's a question.
One of the other challenges we sort of are facing is the road crew doesn't feel like they have any time to be able to deal with this, you know, with all their other activities. So yeah, that was one of the thoughts, that, you know, we could just drop it roadside and let people take care of it. And that's still a possibility. That would certainly be a possibility, I think.
Yeah,
Josh,
so I guess a follow-up question that's sort of related. I mean, this area hasn't seen any activity. I think the closest that some were found was in Derby Line, which is 20 miles away. And I'm wondering, are there areas that are seeing quite a lot of mortality already in our state?
Sure, I can jump in with that and then maybe see who else might have to chip in about the firewood questions. And I see, Josh, you have your hand up as well. Yeah, there are parts of the state with a lot of mortality. The biggest hit areas right now are kind of central Vermont, like Orange, Plainfield, Groton. You can see dead trees along the side of the road. And then the Champlain Islands, particularly like South Hero, that area, although I was in Alberg last summer and there were heavily infested trees everywhere. So those would be the two areas that are kind of the hot spots that I have seen. Josh, did you want to weigh in about either firewood or anything?
Yeah, I'm wondering, you had specifically mentioned one of the things you can put on the Putney Select Board. And we have also inventoried our trees, and I think we're in the same ballpark of 4,000-ish. So it's significant. We have 65 miles of road in Putney. I'm wondering, as far as transporting is concerned, I mean, if it's a municipal undertaking, transport, you said, you know, stay local, which I totally get and agree with. What does that mean, though? And also that question applies to firewood. If you're cutting and dropping and leaving on the side of the road, you know, if somebody comes along and loads it up, I mean, needless to say, if they're going to Massachusetts, that's a problem. But if they're going from one side of Putney to the other, is that also a problem?
I'll weigh in on one part of that and then turn it over to everyone else. But staying within the town doesn't seem like a big problem. Ideally, you want to keep it as close as you can. If you're able to tell, like, this area may be infested, we think the trees look bad, this area looks great, then probably try to avoid transporting the wood over there. But again, really where the line is drawn is transporting knowingly infested wood. So if you're transporting ash that you don't believe is infested and you're keeping it as local as you can, you know, we had town of Waterbury did some ash removals kind of here and there around town, some of their bigger ash. They transported them to a marshalling area near the center town where they keep their sand and all kinds of stuff. They had some big open spaces. And from there, they were bucking and splitting the wood and selling it fairly inexpensively as firewood, as part of a fundraiser for their church communities. It was like a huge logistical undertaking and lots of volunteer hours. I won't say that it was like something easy they did on a Saturday, but that idea of, you know, bringing the wood to one place and either getting it ready for firewood. Montpelier is marshaling their ash wood in one location and hoping to mill it, some of it. You know, I think within the bounds of reason, especially if you don't know that it's infested, is still fine. In a way, you know, leaving it on the roadside is the riskiest because you just don't know where it will go. It could drive 400 miles, you know, that same day. So, but others may have more information. Mark, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I thought I'd share what we've been doing in Charlotte. We just finished our 4th round of preemptive ash tree removals. That was out at Thompson's Point, and the position that I've been taking as tree warden is that the wood belongs to the landowner if they want it. So we've been asking landowners and in the most recent project leaseholders whether they want to keep wood on their property or their lots that's being felled, and some of them are taking us up on that. We've had a couple requests from like Artisan Level. There's a guy here who has a small wood mill, so he's processed a few logs. And then we've donated in the last project and the previous project too, we donated some of the wood to an organization called Goodwood. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with that, but they donate wood to people of limited means who use it for home heating. So that's what we've been doing. It's a little getting the stuff to a mill is a little bit problematic. Mills don't tend to like wood from roadsides because it often has nails and hooks and stuff in it that can foul the equipment. And it's also a little bit small to make it worthwhile for a mill to bring a truck in to haul out a small load of relatively small dimension ash trees. So
Great, thanks, Mark. And yeah, I should have mentioned that the general expectation is that the wood belongs to the landowner. The management rights belong to the town, but the wood itself belongs to the landowner. That's usually how it rolls in Vermont. But as you can imagine, a lot of people don't know what to do with several large trees suddenly put on their land. They may not have any way to manage that. So it's an ongoing process to figure out if people want it or not. Sue, good to see you. Oh, you're still muted. Hold on.
There we go.
There you
So,
Mhm.
yeah, good to see you too. Well, like David, I've taken the game of logging and it really drove home for me. I cut all my wood to heat the house, but it drove home to me how if someone doesn't know how to handle cutting wood, it is risky. And of course, even more so if the tree's not healthy. But one of the debates that we're having here in Halifax is to what extent might we save money by encouraging landowners to cut smaller trees on their property that are on the right of way to reduce how much the town is going to have to spend to do it. And, like you don't want to feel like you're in the position of encouraging someone to do something that's risky. And yet, if a lot of people are comfortable with chainsaws, because a lot of us heat with wood, and they cut a lot of our smaller trees, then we could save, literally hundreds of thousands. I mean, we have just under 5,000 trees in our right of ways. And so I just wonder if other people are encouraging landowners to use their saws and cut the trees, or do you think we need to stay away from that suggestion?
Open the floor to that one.
I'm the tree warden in Cabot. This is Roland Payne. And in previous years before we had any infestation, I basically wrote that in my article that if people wanted to remove trees along the roadside on their property for firewood, sawing, whatever, that they should do so, because once they become infested, they can't be moved. They have to be fallen and left in place or chipped in place or used for firewood right there. And some people actually did that. I don't know if they hired people to cut them or if they cut them themselves or how it was done, but they did it. And I think probably about 15% of the larger trees in town disappeared.
Thanks, Roland. Does anyone else have a thought on that? I'll only add that as a kind of talking head from the state, I have some trepidation of private landowners working in the municipal right of way, of, the tree going the wrong way, or, just controlling traffic, all those types of logistical things. But I hear your question. That's a good question. Yeah.
I might add, again, it's Charlotte and Mark may have better insight, but I think our approach when we were removing the ash trees, we were looking for those that were leaning towards the street or leaning towards something where they would be a hazard if infested. So if the trees were leaning away, but in the right of way and were likely to fall in a place where it wouldn't do harm, those we didn't mark, and that would cut down the amount of money and tree removal we had to do. So that may be one approach people would think about. Yeah.
Thanks, Alexa. David Hall, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, I'm tree warden in Shelburne, and as being the most urban, one of the most urban county in the state, I'd just say that with my contact with most homeowners and property owners in town, I don't think they should be allowed to have chainsaws, much less be cutting trees on a general basis. So we discourage anybody working in the right of way. But we've done 2 cuts and are putting out our bid for a 3rd right now. And we limited the, we put out the word that adjoining property owners were able to get wood and chips from their property. And we had some that took it up on it, and other people, to keep our overall costs down, we didn't want to have our tree service having to travel all over town delivering wood. And when we took the attitude that it's their responsibility to handle it properly. And we have the advantage of the McNeil generating plant right here in the county. So all our wood waste goes there. And we also, when you're talking costs, I think it was Tinmouth said they'd looked at the mechanized harvester. And our initial bid, we had 2 companies come in, and that was for around 75 to 100 trees. 2 companies came in around $20,000. We had 5 companies that came in around $50,000. The company that we ended up going with had a mechanized harvester to do the majority of the work. And it's pretty amazing watching those work, where they can shut down 1 lane of traffic on a straight road and take trees from both sides of the road, and have the big chipper and the log truck, and just boom, one day you've accomplished a lot. So my advice is explore those companies that are more highly mechanized, and there'll be a real cost savings.
David Birdsall, and then we'll go to Josh.
The fellow who we got with the telehandler, he basically said for about $5,000 a day is what it would cost him. And his recommendation was if the road crew could follow along, if he could just go along and start from the top and just dismantle the trees and move on, and let the road crew push and pull or do whatever. And obviously it depends on the tree and everything, but that felt like it was pretty doable. You know, you could get quite a ways, obviously depending on what the trees were like and how many of the trees were, but that felt a lot more workable for us, thinking about it that way.
Great, thank you. Josh, I see you've got your hand up, and I'm just calling people as per their name on Zoom. Hopefully that is your name. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's fine. I'm wondering, for those who we have not, I don't believe, had an actual insect identified within Putney town lines, but I'm aware that once this arrives, it's pretty fast and furious. And I'm just wondering, from maybe some with more experience, as to what the process is. Somebody asked earlier, how proactive do you want to be? And that's been a big question for us. I mean, my assumption is it's only a matter of time till it arrives. And then from there, it's only a matter of time till it's a big problem for us. Anybody got a crystal ball on what kind of time frame we're looking at, as far as, I mean, is that unfolding over the next 2 years or 6 years, or how did it happen for other towns?
I think Vermont is kind of looking at the cusp of that story. So we don't have a ton of answers for how that is working in Vermont, but we look to our neighbors, not only to the Midwest where the insect was first found, but Connecticut, Massachusetts, Quebec. And in fact, like just driving north of the Canadian border up towards Montreal this past summer, having not done that drive for 3 years, the change in the trees was remarkable. There were a lot of dead trees and they were all ash. Crystal ball, I wish I did, but I would say if you haven't seen EAB in Putney or don't know that it's there, you're still looking at many years before you're at peak problem. Like I'll put a number on it. I could be wrong, 10 years, 20 years, maybe even longer, depending on, you know, how quickly the insect spreads there. The issue though gets to safety, cost, and demand. You know, at what point are we looking at super busy arborists or all the people with mechanized equipment are booked out for 2 years? And so there is some merit to getting ahead of that. Dave Wilcox, what do you think? Dave is one of our foresters at FPR, and you're on mute still.
Boy, that's a tough one. I think being in Berlin and knowing that we have it in our town, yet not seeing it spread very quickly, or not seeing visibly infested trees spreading very quickly, it's hard to know if that's just because the insect's not spreading, or it takes a while to see the evidence and then all of a sudden things are going to be appearing quickly. So, you know, as far as time frame, I don't know. I'd like to think 8 or 10 years. I don't think it'd be much beyond that. I don't really know. I know that in L.R. Jones State Forest, where they release the wasps, it's moved a lot faster than we thought. But that's in kind of a connected, you know, there's a lot of ash trees. They're pretty well adjacent to one another, so they don't have to jump very far, so to speak, to be widespread. And in terms of, I did have a question about the mechanized removal. I've seen in some towns like Northfield where they've done roadside removals of trees for more for road maintenance, I think, in terms of like opening the roadway up to the sunlight, and they're cutting all of the trees, pretty much all of the trees in the right of way. And they're actually having a chipper who was coming and doing it I believe, for the value of the trees. Now, that's all of the trees that they're cutting. They're not just taking out the ash trees. And I was curious if, like Dave Birdsall, when you're talking in Tinmouth, were they just cutting ash trees, or were they cutting all trees, or just ash trees? And then, of course, it depends on, you know, your density of ash within those roadsides, and if they're just pulling a few here or there that are, you know, 100 feet apart, or if there's a swath of 20 trees within 100 feet, you know, that, and how big the trees are, and if their power lines are close by. You know, some roads have power lines right up the side of them, they're zigzagging across them. In other roads, like the road I live on, the power lines are all in the woods. Well, they used to be fields, now they're the woods. and I think we're going to see the power companies trying to move those lines to the roads, but there's a lot of what ifs, and it's hard to have that kind of general estimate, because every town is different, every road is different, every quarter mile is different. So how's that for dodging an answer?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Well, it's true. You know, I would add that the budget question will be like any infrastructure problem you see coming. Like, if whatever you can put aside, whether you act on it now or later, the problem is coming and it will be expensive. So that is at least one way to be planning, kind of, if anything, set aside some money, any amount. Josh, yeah.
Sort of follow-up question on that. Given that we're relatively, I think, ahead of the curve on just not having them at least visible yet. Is parasitology a realistic option for a municipality to consider or explore, or is it too localized? I don't know whether we know enough yet.
Yeah, awesome question. And then Dave Birdsall, I saw your hand up. I'll come back to you. Parasitology is not something a municipality can dabble in. And the reason is because the wasps themselves are purchased from a wasp breeder, which is managed by, the federal government. And there's a lot of rules around how those wasps are shipped, who they're shipped to, when they're released. At present, those releases are only done by forest health specialists at the state. And it's pretty tightly regulated. And then there's also some kind of logistical concerns about the landowner. You're going to want to set this up in an area where the landowner will not be switching. So they're often in, or often, there's only 3, but going to be in like contiguous state or federally owned parcels. But it really isn't something that will solve the problem for a municipality. It's kind of taking it all down a notch so that ash don't die as quickly, so that a new generation of ash have a fighting chance, so that we have time to do more research to figure out how to breed hybrid ash or resistant ash or all those things. But it's a great question because as people ask, they're like, great, wasps, we found the answer. Can I buy them on Amazon? And that's kind of a reasonable thing to think because you want to help, but it's actually not that easy. Yeah, Dave Birdsall.
I just wanted to say there's a more predictable or known timeline is once the tree is infested and starts to die, we know we know the timeline of that. It's very fast. In a matter of a couple of years, that tree is going to start falling apart from the top down. And ash trees are known to, once they start to die, to just basically break off right at the ground level. So we're going to see a lot of branches falling off fairly quickly within a year or two once the tree's dead, shedding its upper branches, and then potentially for it to tip over within, not that long. So that is, I think, a predictable timeline once the bug's there.
Yeah. I will say kind of anecdotally, I'm seeing urban areas, areas with green ash planted in such number of feet, having an easier time wrapping their heads around the issue. It's the only tree on the block. They know they either need to treat it or take it down. Those are really the only options. And so we are seeing quite a lot of work happening at the downtown level in towns like Timoth or Halifax or Berlin, where you're looking at most Vermont towns, you're looking at thousands of trees within a publicly managed area. The pros and cons of action are a lot muddier. I did want to just throw one question out to the group again before we maybe touch on the next topic, but how is it going? We're talking to tree wardens and tree board members here. We're talking to people who know a fair bit about emerald ash borer and are concerned. But how is it going in your towns regarding public perception? I've certainly heard some pushback of, if you cut the trees down, that's, 100% guaranteed they'll die. Like, why are you telling everyone to do this? And I agree, if you cut them down, they will die. So, there are many, many reasons to leave trees up in the woods. We collectively, with our municipal hats on, are really looking at this public safety issue and cost, frankly. Like, how are we going to be managing this? And thinking specifically about where trees might hit targets. Have there been any notable changes in your communities where you feel like people are getting behind you, or they're more resistant, or, what's EAB? What are you even talking about? Has anything changed maybe in the last 3 years in your communities? Dave Wilcox.
I would just make an observation that in Berlin, we have most of our power is from Green Mountain Power. And they have been cutting a lot of ash trees along the road under the power lines, and nobody has batted an eyelash. I've been amazed that I haven't heard much disdain about it. And around Christmas time, we went 3.5 days without power. And I think that only bolsters our support for getting trees away from the power lines, especially ones that are going to be risky or hazardous or, cause outages. So, no, haven't heard much. And I think it's partly because people know about EAB, there's awareness out there. People may not know the life stages and the whole story and understand it completely, but they know that there's a reason for cutting the ash trees, at least, along the power lines. We haven't in Berlin proactive in removing trees yet. I think that might be in our future, but certainly trees along the power lines have been removed for almost a year by now.
Yeah. Anyone else got a kind of outreachy story? Alexa?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, two things we did in Charlotte is one is we are inoculating specific trees like the black ash in the park and like specimen trees on, on key sites around town, so that they're aware that there is some balance. We're not just blanket cutting. And the other thing is, I've just lost my train of thought here. We continue to put up the EAB traps and write an article about it so that the issue is very visible around town, just the fact that they see the traps and ask the question, and there's something in the paper that says, we're monitoring for this, we're concerned about this, just helps a little bit with public education and outreach.
Thanks, Alexa. Dave Birdsall. Oh, you're muted.
Ingredients with nothing to hide.
Not yet. You're still muted.
Sorry. When I've been getting the updates from you folks in the state, I put that right on the front porch forum, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And I've gotten a lot of comments from people, same as Dave, just getting the word out, as much as possible. Helps a lot.
Great. Well, I will we could probably talk for many more hours about EAB, and we will in our future. But just kind of noting, since you're often the ones with the the most acute awareness of what's happening with these trees, that yes, there's a lot of need to manage risk to the public. There's a lot of need for public education. There's definitely a lot of need for sort of creative thinking about how to do this, what to do with the wood, how to make the best of this situation. But I think kind of this overarching knowledge that this is a super sad story. We're at a really terrible spot that is not any one person's fault, but we are all going to witness over the next couple of decades a huge change in our forest, absolutely a huge change in our urban landscapes. But just kind of to bring it back to that every now and then, if you find people's blood is boiling about how much it's going to cost, and don't touch my tree, and there's no sort of blame to any one person in particular. It's something that we have to recognize and manage together, and that ultimately, the biggest impact will be looking at these trees before we've lost them. And that's certainly maybe there's a slightly rosier story for white ash than for black or green ash, but however you look at it, it's bad news for ash trees, and we'll see a lot of rapid changes in a way that many people have never seen before. They maybe weren't present for losing Dutch elm or chestnuts. So, just keeping that outreach hat on as tree people, you're not just fighting a problem, you're actually sort of watching a pretty epic change in the landscape as well, and trying to be a part of that solution. So thank you in advance for all your work. we have a couple other topics I wanted to touch on. And I actually didn't have the chat open. I'm sorry. Gwen, is there anything I should be?
Nope, you're all set.
Oh, there are links. Okay. All right, I'll do a little share out now. And, afterwards, since you're all kind of maybe know each other or you're meeting each other now, do reach out to me or Gwen and we can help connect the dots. If you're like, hey, that someone said something about $60,000. What was that? we can help make those connections after the fact as well. There's no quiz at the end here. Feel free to ask questions. So another thing I want to talk about, a bit of an information share out and then a move into our tree inventory and shade tree preservation plan topics. And for anyone who doesn't have your camera on, I'm not ignoring you, I just can't see you. So at any point, if you have a question, please unmute or raise your hand. But I did want to let you know that our program, Urban and Community Forestry Program, does support 2 digital inventory tools. One of them many of you have used, which is that rapid roadside ash tool. You essentially can go around and take some quick and simple data about ash trees and public ways and places and create a bit of a heat map about where the ash are in your town and what the scope of your issue is. So that is a kind of a technical service our program provides for free, and we will continue to provide that. But the other tool we have had since about 2015, I think, is this municipal tree inventory tool. 2013 was when it was first built. And it really is intended to be used more as a street tree tool. You're looking at one tree and then the next tree as opposed to a big clump of ash. And the tool was built as part of a grant-funded project, 2013, 14, 15. And a bunch of towns received assistance that year and got some inventory happening. So you're taking information about location, street name, species of a tree, diameter, condition, and then you have the option to add all sorts of other information about its health, about its management, about what you would do with this tree if you had $1 million, like being able to think of some management objectives. We did do an update over the past year or so, mostly to get in line with some of the tech changes since 2013. Big thank you to some of you who had to beta test it all and deal with all the problems. So I do want to let you know that tool is now launched and available and give you just a little peek. Just this morning, I did some trainings with the town of Williston staff and town of Virgins Conservation Commission, who are trying to use this tool to inventory trees in their downtown. So that we have a guide, and I'm just kind of showing you a little table of contents about what's in there. This is a free digital tool that I can train you to use, and we can go out and do some inventory work. We learn how to download some maps and enter the location data and take a photo, figure out how to put in, where there's a vacant spot, a spot where you might want to plant a tree. So this isn't really for your rural roadsides. This is really for areas where you're managing municipally planted trees or parks as well. You might go get a bit crazy if you try to inventory every tree in the forest. You can talk to one of the foresters about that, but this is definitely more of a point by point basis. And it starts to look like, hopefully you're seeing a map now. Looking at Gwen's head, are you seeing a map, Gwen? Oh, yes, okay. So essentially what you do is use a free, 2 free apps on your smartphone or on an iPad that's loaned to you by our program. Walk around town and start getting some data points about the trees. We're looking at part of Lindenville here at Bandstand Park and some of their roadside trees. You're able to work offline or online and capture enough information that you get a bit of a dashboard. So I zoomed in on one, tree number 64 here in Bandstand Park. Someone has collected information on this. First in, it says the 10th of September 2015, but then someone was there in 2022 doing an update. This is a little leaf linden in good condition in the 12 to 18 inch diameter class. There's a photo. And when you know, go deeper into this web viewer, you get connected to other information about what data has been collected. So I know several of these towns, I see Neil here from Brandon, have been using this tool, and Middlebury as well, Johnson probably, so Charlotte, absolutely. And we've been in Windsor as well. I see Michael Quinn's name. So this is really a tool that is for you. It comes with training by me, use in kind of this field map setting, which some of you might remember from your other inventory work, where you're able to enter data, enter photos, and then kind of, switch over to these surveys where you're either entering some species information, either, all the way down to the specific species, like this shot is a sugar maple. But if you're a person who knows trees sort of, but not absolutely, you might just say it's a maple, and that will work well in the system too. Able to enter some diameter and condition information, and then go into basically a bunch of yes/no questions, like how is this tree managed? Is it a shade tree? Is it a utility right-of-way tree? Answer some questions about the health of the tree. Is there deadwood? Is there a root problem? Make some notes about what's going on in that site. So it becomes sort of a tool for invested municipal staff or volunteers. From there, you can also enter a bit of information about maintenance needs. You don't have to, again, but you can. And I just want to kind of highlight where that stands right now. We have over 24,000 data points in our system. I guess this was as of December. So now that I think I've worked with probably 4 more towns since then, hopefully we have more than that. And it's entered by you. It's entered by whoever, that people who are interested in helping learn about what trees are in their municipality. We have had several UVM classes doing work on tree inventory, particularly ash tree inventory in urban areas. And really, honestly, the biggest boon of this tool and of getting trained to use an inventory tool at all is just to be outside and be looking at what's actually happening on the ground. I think it's easy for us to look at maps and look at spreadsheets and make some broad brush decisions that aren't always tied to what's happening on the ground, like where the snowplow turns around, where the truck backs up, where you planted that beautiful tree last year and then a deer ate it. Like there's something going on, always a story that is best told by being out on the ground. I'm gonna put this list up here because these are towns that have data in our urban tree inventory tool, our municipal tree inventory tool. They are alphabetical, so you can quickly skim to look for your town and notice that either you're not up there, which is totally fine. Maybe you have your own inventory system, or you're not up there and you'd like to learn more. Again, this is a tool that's available to municipalities. That's its entire purpose, to help figure out how you're going to be managing urban trees. So one reason this has been in a bit more use in the last 2 years is because of part 3, the shade tree preservation plans, which is kind of our other main bucket item for tonight. Some of you have been working on shade tree preservation plans, which are the result of the 2020 legislation that updated the Vermont tree warden statutes. And a lot of towns are kind of wanting to do that, but they don't really know what trees they have. So they're not really sure where to start. So doing a tree inventory, either in part or in whole, is a great way to start to figure out, okay, tree warden, what exactly am I in charge of? Where are these things? What would happen if we added other trees defined as shade trees or took some away? I know in Brandon, Neil, you've kind of done the work in that order, like got folks out doing inventory before starting a shade tree preservation plan. He nods, yeah. And just as a quick summary for those who haven't heard of a shade tree preservation plan before, there's a lot to say, but we won't spend too much time on it. But it essentially gets at a shade tree being actually defined as something. The tree warden has jurisdiction over shade trees, and shade trees are either trees planted by the municipality in a public way or public right of way or on municipal property. So if the town planted it in the right of way or on a municipal property, it's a shade tree, no questions asked. Or it's designated as a shade tree in a shade tree preservation plan, which prior to 2020, you never had because it didn't exist. So since 2020, towns have been working to create a shade tree preservation plan. And there's 5 elements that must be in a shade tree preservation plan and 2 things that may be in a shade tree preservation plan. So that if this is something you've taken on, you're able to talk about a program for planting trees, maintenance of shade trees, costs for your tree warden, if you have any money that is going towards that role, determine if anyone else should be paying the tree warden or getting the tree warden service, or if the tree warden should be consulting another body within your town. For example, a cemetery commission, if you're removing trees in a cemetery, a municipal cemetery, I should say, should the tree warden be talking, getting approvals from different bodies? And then, without violating anything that's currently in the statute regarding removal of shade trees, which require the approval of the tree warden, set out any other parameters that you in town want to address regarding tree removals. But the real crux of it, as I'm sure some of you can share, gets to the mays. You may do this in your shade tree preservation plan, which is to say, okay, we know which trees were planted by the municipality in the municipal right of way or on municipal property. We see where those are. They're plunked in the ground in the sidewalk or in the greenway or in our village green. We would like to designate other trees as shade trees because they have cultural, historical, or aesthetic character. They add that character in the municipality. And we would like the tree warden to be involved in the care of that tree. And by extension, having the public be able to weigh in. It's essentially saying that some trees provide a greater public good than other trees, and that the public will be able to weigh in on how those trees are cared for. So this is a huge gray area that many of you have been delving into starting in about 2021 of trying to draft a shade tree preservation plan that makes enough people happy in your municipality. So I'll definitely, pass some of the stories on to you, but while we have that discussion, I want to make sure there's a couple of long numbers up here. Just if you're a person who likes to go to the actual statutes and read things, this is what statutes we're talking about. There's also a lot of resources on our website. If you go to vtcommunityforestry.org and look for resources about shade tree preservation plans. But I do want to turn the mic over to some of you because you've been working on these shade tree preservation plans and likely have some stories to share. I do want to say that we worked with 10 towns using some grant fundings to get some of these shade tree plans off the ground. I've worked with maybe another 8 or so who are working on it on their own. And it's pretty tough. And it's taking some smart people a lot of work to make some decisions about shade tree management in their town. So as far as I understand, and I wish Phil Crane was here tonight, but as far as I understand, the only municipality that has passed a shade tree preservation plan is Mount Holly. I don't have all the details on that, and Phil Crane is the tree warden there, so he could offer a bit more information on that. But many of you have brought your shade tree plans to the select board, to your city council, to your city manager. So I'd love to hear kind of a few of those stories, and most importantly, any of your big questions that you're looking at right now. So maybe I'll start with someone that I can see who jumped on, Noel from Johnson. The Johnson crew has worked pretty diligently on their plan, and I'm wondering where it sits right now, and if you could just kind of generally describe your approach.
Well, the discussion of it brings a pang of guilt because I have been so busy that I really haven't been able to pick it up again in the last few months, as I think you're probably aware. We got a lot of legwork done. I think the biggest hurdle, in the beginning, the select board really, we got a unique situation in Johnson in that there's separate town and village municipalities. So there's the town is split. And so half our trees are in the village, but they're in a town right of way, or they're in a more complex state highway right of way. And so who has jurisdiction over how to manage those? Those are the trees we really wanted to get into the shade management plan. And the select board essentially said, well, those are village trees and we have a contract that says that the state is going to take care of them. So why would we want to be in charge of taking care of them? So lots of right of way issues, I guess, that we went through. And I need to get back onto it and get it back in front of the select board. But of course, this is budgeting season. So they've been completely engulfed in town meeting prep and budget prep. So not much of an update for me, unfortunately.
Well, Johnson had an interesting approach too, to really go beyond the municipally planted trees to essentially all trees on municipally owned property, and a couple of right of ways, but mostly the municipally owned property. And it was interesting to hear people sort of rehash all the town boundaries of what exactly is municipal property and who once owned it and what it is now. It's so many details. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the update, Noel. Neil and Brandon. Oh, did I just lose? Oh no, there he is. Hi, Neil. I know you've been working on your shade tree plan as well.
Yeah, you wrote it with my help.
You wrote it with my help.
And when I brought it to the select board, somebody came back at me and said, we did have issues because we have a lot of rural roads that don't really need the same kind of care and attention as the kind of extended downtown area. I brought it to the select board and one of them brought up the difference between an ordinance and a plan, which is a very interesting discussion. You can have either, you can have both. And I ended up saying, I just want to proceed with the plan just because it's so much easier to get passed. It only requires the select board to pass it. And as I was in the process of writing, I realized that we had an inventory that we should be using. So I went back and rephrased everything so that it incorporates the inventory, so that not only will we have, because the inventory is not finished yet, we'll have an inventory of shade trees, which the shade tree preservation plan expanded the definition of from the regulation, from the statute. And I'm hoping, and I was thinking today for the first time that there might not be a field for ongoing maintenance and ongoing commentary about a tree in the database, in the inventory database.
There is a field for ongoing maintenance.
So what I'm hoping to do, and the town of Brandon hit a snag when the town manager decided to resign just recently. I think it's going to be a long process. I don't think anybody's got issues. The only issue that was brought up after the select board had a chance to look at things was, isn't $500 pretty expensive? You know, if somebody cuts down a shade tree. So yeah, but trees are important. So, I'm thinking that we're on the road to get it passed. I'm at a kind of a multiple disadvantage. I'm new in Vermont. I'm not a super tree person. And I'm just getting to know Brandon. So I think it's going to be a couple of years before this all gets worked out.
Interesting. Thanks, Neil. Yeah. Josh, I see you.
Also, I want to say, I think it is going very well.
I would agree. Yeah. It's very slow, but I think it's going well. Yeah. Josh.
I'm curious, sort of two-part question. One of the areas that, I mean, we are also on a state road, which complicates things dramatically. But one area that I feel there's a particular need for shade trees is at our school. But I'm wondering whether people have experience with interaction with supervisory unions as far as this is concerned, and sort of what that relationship has been like. And then also any use of, I mean, you know, a couple of the local high school districts have horticultural programs per se in their tech divisions. And I'm wondering whether there are towns that have been able to use that to their advantage in any way. So essentially relationship between municipality and supervisory union. And just comment, I know it would be anecdotal, but I'm just interested.
I can't think of anyone to call on directly on this one. Does anyone have a thought on that?
Yeah, I can chime in. Actually, the first letter I wrote as a tree warden was to save a massive maple tree from a barn that was being removed on a municipal school property. This was before the school choice and the modified unified unions all went together. And it's actually changed. So that was considered town land at the time. And then with the change in the school districts, it's now not municipally owned. It's owned by the school district essentially. And the select board in various discussions decided that since it wasn't town property, then none of those trees were applicable to the tree warden. So that's as far as we got. I haven't had any more interaction on it, but there was some interaction.
I assume that would be the case for us as well, given the same merger aspect. And I guess I'll just keep you posted as we proceed. But it seems like there should be able to be a symbiotic relationship there, but I'm not sure there can everywhere, certainly, but maybe.
In Shelburne, we've had a relation, or we've reached out to some of the teachers that have environmental classes, and actually Joanne went and helped them do an inventory on of the ash trees on the campus. And as well as we have a tree committee as well as the tree warden, and I'm on the tree committee as well as being tree warden. But we've been working with the class. They also just got Tree Campus USA last year, and I think they're going to apply for it again this year. So, you know, working with the campus, I had reached out when EAB really came to the front to the principal and the staff, and we never got anywhere with that. If you want to have interaction, find somebody on staff that loves trees and wants to do something with their kids, and work with them. That's my advice.
Dave, and then Neil, I think, had his hand up too. Dave?
Yeah, am I off mute? I just wanted to add that I've worked with the Berlin Elementary School for several years when my kids were just starting there all the way up through, and now they're one of them graduating high school, and I'm still helping with the elementary school. And beware the 3 acre or the 3 acre rule, because schools have requirement to meet the certain stormwater rules now, or if they have 3 acres of impermeable surface. And we had to move 7 apple trees that we had planted in an orchard, apple orchard with the school, because of a retention pond, which if you looked at it, you'd laugh, because it seems like way overkill, but water quality is important. I can't deny that. But yes, it's kind of a crapshoot working with schools. Find a teacher that has an interest, and hope they don't retire soon. But it's a very rewarding thing, you know, working with the students, and we have actually a tech center in Barrie that comes up and helps prune And every spring we take off the rodent guards, and every fall we put the rodent guards back on. We haven't had deer issues pruning or working on our apple trees, but like I said, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but it's very rewarding. And someday they're going to be just buried in apples at Berlin Elementary, and I'm looking forward to that day. So, but I would put in a plug though, that if somebody were to figure out how the school districts versus municipalities works, it would be good to let, to share that out with us, because there's got to be a way, a mechanism for utilizing good sound management. Because like I said, our school went through a building of sediment pond, and there was nobody to advocate for the trees. And I just happened upon driving by one day and seeing them ripping trees out of the ground, and I got involved and made a little bit of a stink. But it was just, a parent essentially. I had no standing as a tree warden or as a resident. It was just because I had a history with the trees. So little anecdotal information.
Great, thanks, Steve. Neil, did you have something?
What I had was actually, I think probably just a way to make more work for you. Every time I have gotten together with a group of tree wardens, I think that there's so much that everybody's got to share, and we don't really have a good way to do it. We don't have like quarterly meetings, etc. I'm wondering if there's a way to transmit information, like I reached out to the school, or we had a problem with this, kind of in not in super detail, but just so that we would have a way to know what was going on with other tree wardens.
It occurs to me, and I don't know whether this is a possibility for you to be able to organize, but our town manager uses a system called MuniNet, which she sort of lives by for all sorts of things. I don't know whether it's a possibility that there could be a tree warden aspect of MuniNet, or somehow have a system like that. But that's very much what it is. You could just post a question and people have the opportunity to sort of weigh in and answer from anywhere, but it's unique to, I think in her case anyway, to town managers, but I'm not 100% sure, or town administrators. But
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think anyone can sign up for MuniNet postings. Good question though about, does anyone post to them, or does it need to be town managers? Yeah.
I've marked that question down, Joanne, so we can talk about it, but I did want to get to a question in the chat that Mark had asked. And I know this is something that you've delved into, but it goes back to the shade tree preservation plans. Since they are approved by the select board, is that the equivalent to an ordinance? Can you add a clarification to that?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I could. Well, Neil, you were dealing with this specifically in Brandon. My understanding is that ordinances have a lot more weight than plans. Maybe someone else can speak more precisely than I can.
I don't know which is stricter or more enforceable. I heard that there was a difference maybe in the court path that offenses would take, but the ordinances that I looked at and the shade tree preservation plans that I looked at were pretty much the same. They covered the same areas. They had the same penalties. And from what I could gather, and this is really a totally, I was going to say illegal, but unlegal approach. The shade tree preservation plan just gets approved by the select board. It does not need town vote, as far as I know. An ordinance requires that it be warned, that it go out, that there be discussion with the townspeople. And to me, it seemed like it's as long as they were both going to accomplish the same thing, unless you had flagrant violators, you wouldn't really need the extra authority of an ordinance. Or I guess if your municipality had reached a significant enough size.
Yeah. The shade tree preservation plans by statute do need to have at least one public meeting before those are accepted by the select board. So that is one piece. And then there are, even without a shade tree preservation plan, there are many aspects of municipal tree law that apply to violations. For example, removal of a shade tree without permission of the tree warden. There's some fines that are set for that now. I think we had someone from a select board, or at least one person, who may be able to weigh in more.
I just would say ordinances are more cumbersome to pass. There's a higher level of requirements as far as public participation, et cetera. It doesn't have to go to a townwide vote, but it does have to, it's open, subject to more public hearing, time periods, waiting periods, et cetera, et cetera. So, I believe more legally enforceable, but I may be misspeaking on that.
So put a foot in my mouth and I said, I'm on a select board. So I guess you're part of the one I was pointing to. I'm part of the one you were pointing to. I don't know that I don't have, I'm not an attorney, so I can't really speak to the law of it. But sometimes I think in towns when the community gets behind something, whether it's an ordinance or a plan, or what have you, if people are behind it, there's not so much of an issue of enforcing things. It's kind of like community support for something, and it's a heck of a lot more fun to pull a rope than it is to try to push it across the yard. So I think if we can convince people it's a good idea, and hopefully never get to the point where you have to enforce things, but it's kind of a community effort that's kind of fun to push. And that's probably not a very good answer to the question, but that's the way I feel about it.
That's helpful. Thank you. Mark Dillenbeck, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the thinking behind my question was that we have these new statutes from the state that say that a shade tree can be a tree that's designated in a shade tree preservation plan that's approved by the select board. So, if there's a shade tree protection plan approved by the select board that says that shade trees are, X, then, that becomes an element of the existing statute. So it has the power of a state statute, falls under that. So then there wouldn't be a need for an ordinance to, further empower, the protection of shade trees as defined by the local plan.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's clear.
I'll give a quick shout out to Vermont League of Cities and Towns Municipal Assistance Center. When you're ready to get all your lawyer question answered, they are the lawyers that we utilize. So it's the MAC, Municipal Assistance Center at Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And they serve you, municipal officials. So quick shout out to them. Maybe Gwen can throw a link in the chat too if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have thoughts on passing plans, passing ordinances?
Well, I just wanted to give a quick shout out, Joanne, too. It is 7:55, so we got about 5 minutes to wrap up. So time flies when you're talking trees.
I guess so. Yeah, about ending at 7:30. I was joking, apparently. So yeah, I mean, there's more to say about these shade tree preservation plans. They're definitely picky documents. And I think part of our work is to share the facts. I think sometimes we come to the select board with a finished draft that a group has been working on for 1.5 years, but it's actually so complicated. And being able to explain that to someone who's never even heard of a shade tree is a big part of the outreach battle, for sure. I wonder, two questions, I guess, in our remaining 4 minutes. If anyone has any further thoughts on shade tree plans or all this kind of, working with plans and ordinances in your municipality, or a burning question, I'd love to hear it. I will say we had hoped to have kind of a, what do you need for support conversation, which we won't get too far into tonight, but I do want to say next Tuesday, February 14th, is our next webinar that is going to be focused on a lot of like funding opportunities that are coming down the pike, that we expect to come down the pike, I should say, and how you all can be prepared to utilize those funds for your tree programs. So that kind of discussion of like, what are the things I need, we could also continue next week. But any other further thoughts about shade tree plans? Josh, or thoughts?
I'm
about
just
anything?
wondering, given the politically charged date of February 14th, will we have access to information from that meeting if we can't be present in person because we're otherwise occupied?
Yes, we will be recording and sending it out.
Just make sure
Great,
you
thank
register for it. Make sure you register for it so you'll get the link afterwards.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
You know, there's a couple of folks from Middlebury here who I haven't heard from. Hi, Leslie and Chris. Russ from Northfield as well. Anyone else have any sort of closing thoughts or questions?
David put in another plug for the tree warden forum. So that is something we'll continue to stew on and make happen.
Yeah, we started kind of a Google group, I guess, with the Shade Tree Preservation Plan towns. And I might try to revitalize that while making it better. David.
I don't know. I'd be curious to know if anybody who's in a more rural community or town is working on a shade tree policy.
We do have some. Yeah, I mean, I might volunteer Charlotte a bit. You've got a lot of rural spaces. Someone was here from Hartford, I thought too, which has both urban and rural spaces. But anyone else want to jump in on that thought? I had a great conversation with Sue Kelly, who I think isn't on the call anymore, from Halifax, about how she was wanting to, but realized they have absolutely no municipal land in town at all. And that really, changed how she could think about having a shade tree plan. Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Yeah. So all I really could find to tap into was cemeteries. And we do have about 8 or 9 public cemeteries in town and several private ones. And even there were just a few trees that I thought, well, that's a really significant tree, just not enough to make a plan, wrap a plan around. And so I thought maybe at some point we can go back to considering the roadside, because the right of way would be the only other municipal area. But again, there won't be anything that was planted by the town. So it will be a question of how would we figure out which trees we would want to designate.
Thanks, Sue. Folks in Charlotte, what's your current threshold for designating a roadside tree as a shade tree? Up for debate.
Yeah, it's we're still trying to figure this out. We're getting a little bit of pushback about what should be a shade tree. I think there seems to be a good group of people who like to set a diameter limit and include trees in the right of way throughout the town. But there's an element of folks in the town who would prefer that there be no restrictions on tree removals on their property, in the right of way. So, it's gotten to be a bit political in that way.
Oh, Sue, you're on mute.
Yeah. I'm afraid it's going to be very much the same here, Mark. It's going to be, but that's my tree, that's my land. So if we really tried to do that with the right of way, I think our energies are going to really be focused more for the next several years on ash tree issues and EAB. Whereas when I got appointed as tree warden right after the new law was passed, I thought, oh, the shade tree preservation plan, that's going to be where it's at. And I just don't think that's gonna really work as well for Halifax as I had hoped. But maybe with the increase in public awareness because of EAB and all of that, maybe that will give us a foothold toward a shade tree preservation plan down the road.
Thanks, Sue. And Sue Smith, did you want to weigh in as well? Oh, you're still muted there. The gremlins of Zoom hiding the mute button. Well, maybe you can put it in the chat too, or we can share out your information afterwards. I think maybe we had one more question from Josh,
Okay,
and then
I
we'll.
think I got it.
Oh, there you go. Yep. All right.
It was my understanding that with the new tree statutes, our right-of-way trees, our roadside trees are not protected right now at all. And I urge that we protect everything in our roadsides until we have a better plan, because we've been doing it that way since I've been in Charlotte, since 1970. And it's worked well. So I hate to see people just going out and cutting out the right-of-way trees. And I think it'd be really hard to have volunteers going out and measuring trees every few years to see which ones have grown and are now in the size to be protected, etc. That's my thought. So in Charlotte, we're all over the place, the whole continuum of opinions.
Yeah, we'll go to Alexa and then Josh, and then we'll close up. And totally fine if folks are wanting to head off. It's 8. Yeah.
I just wanted to say the one ironic thing is that before the state enacted this new tree warden statute, we had jurisdiction over all of the trees in the right of way and on municipal property, and it worked pretty well. And now that we have this concept of a shade tree preservation plan where we need to designate beyond what's planted, that's what's become controversial. And I find that ironic because things had gone along beautifully, and the thought that, well, maybe we just continue the way things always have been that have not created a problem seems to be getting pushback, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that perception. Josh, you want to round us out with one last question?
I'm just curious, we just finished a process with the VCRD doing related to essentially town planning and town ideas. And one of the things that came up for us was beautifying our downtown. And I'm just wondering, as far as a shade tree, we're, a town of 2,700 with, roughly half to 3/4 of a mile of sort of Main Street-ish type streets. Do you guys have a limitation on size of what you would work with a town for shade tree preservation? I mean, if this was something we wanted to do and sort of had a mandate from the public, are you willing to work with us on it, or is a small town not eligible?
Was our program willing to work with you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something, we had this sort of focused 10 town effort to get folks going. They were the first 10 towns really to take on the project. Definitely some lessons learned, and we have kind of a skeleton template for shade tree preservation plans that came out of that. But yeah, our program is still available to help provide information. And then, what's been really interesting too is to read different people's plans to say like, oh, yours is a bit like this person's, would you mind if I share? And being able to sort of equate towns that have maybe a similar population and similar landscape. But yeah, no, as much as our staff is capable capacity-wise, we're definitely here to help. Yep.
And we did
Great,
briefly
thank you.
meet with Paul Lavasser and Putney too. So we heard a little bit about their tree tree interests down in Putney. Sounds like you got a good crew of tree enthusiasts down there.
We do, but we're disparate. And so we need to organize that. And, again, through this VCRD process, we did get sort of some mandates. So we might be able to help in urging that on, but Paul is definitely deeply involved. So thank you.
You are welcome, and thank all of you. We're just after 8, so we'll wrap it up for tonight. This is hugely useful to us, to our program staff, just to hear from all of you, and I hope useful to each other. I'm glad we had a good kind of cross-section of municipalities in terms of size, urban nature, rural nature. The story is not over at all when it comes to EAB and ash tree management, so let's keep sharing information. And again, stay tuned, either tuning in next Tuesday evening for our next webinar about, the funding landscape and your opportunities to really think about what your municipality needs. And those things may be very different from each other, and that's totally fine. We'd love to hear all of those ideas. I will maybe let us wrap up unless, Gwen, you have any closing comments.
No, I did put a plug in for the 2023 Tree Steward Awards too. So if there's someone in your community that's inspired you, please feel free to nominate them. We do have a special section for tree wardens too. So there's a tree warden only category. We do have some past Tree Steward Award winners in here, but it is a nice honor, and there's recognition at our upcoming Arbor Day conference,
which will be May 19th at Vermont Technical College in Randolph.
We hope.
We hope.